the book titled Final Warning. You've devoted your life to trying to foresee the future by studying science, archaeology, Bible predictions. Do you agree with those three groups? Are we in the footsteps of the coming of the Messiah?
I believe we are, for the very solid reason that the Bible, the Old Testament prophecies that both the Jews and Orthodox Christians believe, describe that there will be a certain generation, a set of time, in the lifetime of a group of people, Sid, in which a series of prophecies, predictions would come to pass. They included the rebirth of the nation Israel, the revival of the ancient Roman Empire, which we see happening in Europe
I have
today.
to ask you a question, though. To be quite candid with you, most people are not too sure that the Bible is from God. At best, most people feel it's fables to keep people in line.
I don't agree, and I don't agree for this reason. I've studied the religious literature of the world. There's a total difference between the Bible and other religious literature, and here's one way that they're different. Every other species of religious literature does not contain detailed prophecy, for the very good reason that no one as a human alone can possibly predict tomorrow's events. No New Age psychic dares predict the outcome in detail of a football game tomorrow, because the odds are over 5,000 to 1 you would be wrong guessing the exact scores.
Okay, well, maybe a New Age psychic doesn't do that, but what about someone like a Nostradamus? He's predicted things, and when I've heard, they've all come true.
No, they haven't. People have stated that they've come true after the fact by reinterpreting what he wrote. He wrote in French in the most really unusual grammar, the most unusual language in a poetic form possible. For example, today you will hear people write books where they'll say that Nostradamus in 1555 predicted Adolf Hitler as the dictator of Germany. He did no such thing. What he did is he wrote a prophecy about Isler, and this Isler is so vague in his prophetic quatrain that you can't even tell whether it's a river or a man. And I have a book from 1930, before Hitler ever rose, and it states that he was predicting the course of the river Isler in Germany. Only after the fact, Sid.
Wait a second now. You're talking Nostradamus. He had just vague, abstract type things, and people are looking. But that's what a lot of people say about the Bible. You guys take some abstracts and make people think it's absolute predictions.
Well, I believe that if you examine the Bible, even a group of educated teenagers, and ask them, what does this prophet really say? That the vast majority of them would agree that the prophets really do describe specific things. For example, the Bible clearly says that the nation Israel would be reborn. It clearly describes that there would be a revival of the Roman Empire invoking 10 nations in the last days. One of the most amazing, Sid, is the prophet Zephaniah, 25 centuries ago, predicted that God would restore unto the Jews a pure language, Hebrew. Now, no ancient nation ever lost its language and ever recovered it. Yet in our generation, a man by the name of Eleazar ben Yehuda in Israel literally took this dead language of 7,000 words and started creating new words for airplane and fountain pen and machine gun. Today, millions of Jews in Israel speak Hebrew, the language of the Bible. This is an extraordinary prophecy, but there's one even more amazing. The Bible tells us in the book of Revelation in the New Testament that there'll come a crisis in, I believe, this generation, in which 2 of God's messengers will be killed. And when they're killed, in the 3.5 days, their bodies lie unburied in Jerusalem. The whole world gets together and has a party, and then is astonished as they rise to heaven. Now think about this. This could only happen, Sid, in a day of worldwide CNN communication. We watched, literally hundreds of millions of people watched OJ go down the highways in Southern California. Millions, in fact, 1 billion people watched the Olympics. Only in this generation with worldwide TV could the whole world watch in 3.5 days the death of 2 people and watch them and have a party and give gifts, and in 3.5 days see them rise to heaven, because in any other generation it would have taken a week for the evidence to get to all the way to America.
What does your research tell you as far as the coming of this Messiah?
I believe that our generation is the one that he will come. In my research, Sid, I found that there's 38 of these prophecies that come together in our generation. Now, the Bible doesn't allow us to set dates, not at all. But the Bible does tell us again and again that there will be a group of people who will be alive, who will see the rebirth of the nation Israel, all of these other prophecies, and then the coming of the Son of Man, the Messiah. The reason I'm excited about this is, though the Bible does tell us that there's a time of terrible crisis coming, wars and rumors of wars and plague. The Bible indicates that when the Messiah comes, the world will finally know peace and prosperity, the end of torture, the end of war, the end of plague. And that's why I see it as good news.
Right, but what is going to happen between now and that time?
A number of very, very major events. One of them, the Bible indicates that there's going to be a great war when a great number of nations are going to join, Arab nations together with Russia, and invade Israel. And they're going to be defeated supernaturally by God. Then the Bible says that there's a dictator.
You say Russia. Russia is like after communism. They're about down for the 10 count.
Oh no, they are in economic trouble. They've been in economic trouble since 1917. Russia militarily is the strongest military force on the planet. They have not disarmed a single Soviet division. All 15 republics are now united together in Russia under a defense pact. The KGB operates through all 15 republics. Every one of the leaders of those countries are men who were dedicated communists up until 1991. Anyone who believes that all these people have become wonderful Western Democrats overnight is really dreaming.
What other things can we be looking for to indicate the soon coming of the Messiah?
Well, the Bible indicates something astonishing, Sid. It indicates that there's going to be a worldwide dictator, though he rises in Europe and takes over this kind of revived Roman Empire, these 10 nations who come together. We've seen the 1957 Treaty of Rome. We've seen
what 10 nations?
Well,
I don't understand.
The nations that were part of the Roman Empire geographically. They would include, obviously, the area of France and Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, even Israel, Egypt. Those countries were part of Rome in the days of Christ. The Bible says they'll come together, and they have for the first time in 2,000 years. But here's what it says. It says this man, to literally control the people of the world, will introduce a cashless society in which the only way you can buy and sell is based on having a number, 666, embedded beneath the skin of your right hand or forehead. Now, John wrote this 2,000 years ago in the book of Revelation. Never in history has money been anything other than coins or paper. Yet he said money will be numbers, and if you don't have the number, you can't buy and sell. We are moving rapidly, Sid, for the first time in history, toward an economy that is based on number. We're already 95% cashless. If you look at the money that went through your hands last year, less than 5% of it ever hit your wallet in terms of currency, in terms of coin or cash.
You know, you're watching us right now, but you're about to find out someone is watching.
Has a radio frequency device in here with a unique identifier number. They might have 1,000 Haitians named Jean-Baptiste. This allows them to know who has AIDS and who does not, who has been cleared to be a refugee to the States and who has been rejected. But this kind of technology allows them from a helicopter to literally look down and know where every one of the individuals is. The Bible tells us that in the last days, in this generation when the Messiah will come, that a worldwide dictatorship will be established. But what is curious is the Bible indicates that money will be eliminated, and that in place of money there will be a numbering system based on 666. Well, Sid,
what is the 666? I've heard of that often.
That is the identification that ties in the name of this man. In Hebrew and Greek, they're alphanumeric languages, which means every letter has a number. If you add up the values of the letters of any name in Greek or Hebrew, you end up with a number. It might be 17,028. My name might be 9,036. But this man's name will be 666. Revelation tells us that the mark and the number is the name of the beast. This number will tell those who are believers in God at the time, don't take this mark. The Bible says it will be placed on your right wrist or on your forehead. Now this device
pretty interesting. That's on the wrist.
On the right wrist only.
What happens if you don't take?
You're not
if
allowed
I decide
to
I don't want to put this on, what's going to happen to me?
Well, if you're a Haitian refugee, they literally will not allow you to stay in the base. They forcibly put it on every single person. Even the U.S. Marines wear them to encourage the Haitians and Cubans, look, there's nothing harmful here. But in an ID, Automated News, an industry magazine dealing with identification, they interviewed Haitians and they said they didn't like this because the Bible warned about a number attached to their right wrist in the last days. Now, this is not the mark of the beast, nor are any of the technologies I'm talking about. The important, Sid, is this.
What do you mean by mark of the beast?
The mark of the beast is this number, 666, that the Bible says this dictator will literally put on the right wrist or forehead of everyone, and if you have it, if you've given your allegiance, you will be able to buy and sell. If you don't have this mark, if you're a rebel, you will literally be unable to buy and sell in the future. Now, at no other time in history was this possible. But today, we have technologies such as the U.S. Department of Defense. It has this mark card, which has not only a magnetic strip, such as credit cards, it has a barcode, it has a computer chip, and the embossed photograph of the individual, interestingly called the mark card. Now, this is just one indication of how we're moving away from dog tags and other types of identification to something that can be electronically read, but more importantly, read at a distance. Here is a Royal Bank card from Canada. A friend of mine has this, and this gold circle is a computer chip. This computer chip, Sid, can be read not only by putting it through a scanner, but as he walking into a vault, into a room with this in his pocket, in his wallet, the computer scanners built into the walls or into the doorway can read this and know that this is this particular employee and that he's been 28 and a half minutes in the vault. What people don't realize is that these new smart cards, these credit cards with a computer chip, are radio frequency, which means they can be read by a scanner built into the doors of an airport, a bus station, major buildings. We are moving, Sid, to the first time in history when it's possible to monitor the actions of everybody in the population at once.
What about this implant of a chip? I mean, we're in the computer age right now.
Yes.
Which, I mean, you blink your eyes and something new and new. Technology seems to be expanding. Is it possible to put something in a hand or in a forehead that will work just like this?
They're already doing it. In Europe, 100 million head of cattle and 84 million head of sheep have a computer chip about twice the size of a grain of rice. It's injected in the neck by a little hypodermic device by a veterinarian. From a satellite, 100 miles in space, looking down over the 9 million farms of Europe, they can tell that Farmer Brown has 37 head of cattle and 18 head of sheep. And then they compare that with his records where he asks for a subsidy based on the head of cattle and the number of head of sheep.
Why would people let them do this? I mean, you said the Haitians, they realize they're up to something. Why would, not just people, the world?
Okay. It's a really good question. The Bible doesn't tell us other than when it's finally introduced and it becomes the mark of the beast, this worship of Satan, then obviously it's do it or die. The Bible says anyone who refuses it will be beheaded, so it's ultimately coercion. I suspect, though, that the system will be introduced in a very innocent, innocuous way. Right now, there's a tremendous demand for a health security card, such as the one I'm holding. Many Americans realize that President Clinton held up such a card on national TV, and he said, all Americans will have their identification, and a computer chip behind the U.S. seal will contain all your medical records, every sensitive medical test you've ever done. When you go into a pharmacy or into a doctor's office, you'd give it to them and they would read it. This card was to be biometric, which meant your voice print would be electronically embedded in the computer chip,
what does
or
that
your
mean?
handprint. Every voice is different than everyone else, just like a fingerprint said. And when they embed your voice electronically into the chip, then when you would submit the chip, you would say, my name is Grant Jeffrey. If my voice is not identical with the electronic representation in the computer chip inside the card, then this is counterfeit. It's not my card. That's how they're going to make sure they eliminate counterfeiting, even from future debit credit cards, by having either your handprint or your voice print.
How quickly could all this be implemented?
Well, here's a card. Many foreigners are using this card, an impasse card. The U.S. Department of Immigration gave me this particular card, took my electronic handprint. When I go in the United States now, I don't have to answer a lot of questions at customs. I simply submit the card, I put my hand in a scanner, and I walk through and go into the United States, and they update their computers that I'm in the United States. You see, the technology now allows the government to monitor everything. For example, every phone call you and I make, as I mentioned in Final Warning, is now being monitored by the intelligence agencies in Britain, Canada, the United States, and worldwide.
You're saying that my phone calls are monitored?
Local and long distance. Now, they obviously
Wait a second.
don't have...
Janie, with all that you're on the telephone, what do you think about your phone calls being monitored?
I don't want everyone hearing what I'm saying.
I mean, that's kind of outrageous.
It is. I don't want to be watched and controlled.
Grant, it's like they're going to be like Janie and like myself. It's a big uproar about it. We don't want to be watched or controlled.
That's why they've kept it quiet. Now, under the new anti-terrorism omnibus legislation that's passed after the Oklahoma bombing, this has now been made legal, but it was been done for the last 4 years illegally. The program is called the Oratory Program. It's sometimes referred to as the Dictionary Program. They can't possibly listen to all our voices. There's not that many people in the world to listen. How do they do it?
Sid, I want to ask a question.
Sure.
I'm just curious, how come the general public doesn't know about this?
Yeah,
Because
pretty good
most-
question.
Most of the public is not doing the kind of research I'm doing. BBC did run a documentary on the British Oratory Program, and they mentioned that this was how all those phone calls that Prince Charles made to that woman who was not his wife, how they were obtained. They weren't focusing specifically on him, they were listening to everybody. The BBC mentioned that inside the British Parliament, they interviewed the head of MI6 intelligence who admitted that they have the technology that can, in fact, listen to all phone calls. But they didn't admit publicly to the public parliament that they were, in fact, listening to all British citizens. But they are. My intelligence sources have confirmed. And I
My
have
intelligence
many.
sources of the Messiah. AIDS, is this in the Bible?
The Bible does tell us in the words of Jesus that there would be a time of devastating plagues and pestilence in the last days. But John in Revelation, the last book of the Bible, went even further. He stated that the fourth horseman of the apocalypse in this terrible 7-year period would literally be a plague-colored horseman that would take 1/4 of the population of the earth. Now, Sid, in no other time in history was this possible. Plagues reach the end of a city or country and stop. But today, AIDS is now epidemic around our world. According to recent research coming out of Zambia, out of Tanzania, out of Uganda, they just tested Tanzanian soldiers. 100% of the entire army tested positive for AIDS. What that means is Tanzania, as one of the East African countries, will have no army in another 2 or 3 years. The middle class of all of Central Africa is just devastated. Even in South Africa, they've now found in random testing for blood that over 50% of the population test positive for AIDS. According to the CIA and the report given to the President of the United States 2 years ago, they stated that up to 75% of the population of Africa south of the Sahara will become sick of AIDS in the next 12 to 15 years. That's 375 million people. That's just Africa. Asia, it's going to be just as bad, and in South America. In no other time in history could this have happened. This is the worst tragedy in human history, and the Bible said that it would happen in the generation when the Messiah would return.
And the thing that's concerning me is this AIDS virus is now mutating, so if they ever find a solution for AIDS, what are they going to do about the next thing that's mutating to? And then the drugs we have are beginning to not have effect, like penicillin. What about the weather? There seems to be such strange weather patterns going on. Is that predicted?
Well, it is. The Bible talked about there being signs in the sea, in the heavens, and it talks about the strange weather patterns, earthquakes. People say, well, look, there's always been earthquakes, and there have. About one killer quake a decade. Now, a killer quake is 7.2 in the Richter scale or higher. Terrible quake. One every decade for the known history of man. Yet in 1900, it started going. 4 a decade. Then in 1948, with the rebirth of Israel, it went to 9 killer quakes that decade. Then to 17, 23, 56, 72. In the year 1990 to the year 2000, it's estimated the present rate, Sid, will have 125 killer quakes, from 1 a decade to 125 at this rate. This is not business as usual. When you look at these things, you recognize that what the Messiah said, Jesus said, that he would return because if he delayed any longer, no life would be saved. I believe Christ will have to return to save the world from AIDS, from these earthquakes, from these devastating things. They're all coming together.
What about wars?
Well, the Bible said there'd be wars and rumors of wars. Again, there's always been wars, but never like today. Even since World War II, we've had 370 wars worldwide. We have seen over 40 million people die in bloody warfare since 1945, and we call it peace. The world, Sid, is arming for Armageddon. While we are talking peace in the West, Russia is arming like mad. China is increasing her military armaments 40% every year. The doomsday weapons that now exist, chemical, biological, and even nuclear weapons that are in the hands of unstable third world countries, suggest that this is in fact the time spoken of by the prophets.
How about even the immorality? I mean, even people that aren't Bible believers are saying there is something wrong. There's never, it seems as though there's never been a time where it's so pervasive. I imagine it's television that's doing that, that's spreading this.
I believe television certainly has a role, and in Final Warning I talk about television's effect on causing increasing violence among young people. But it's worldwide. We're watching in China. They're literally executing prisoners in China for their organs. They're harvesting their organs and literally causing their organs to be taken to Hong Kong and literally transplanted into people who are willing to pay $200,000 for a kidney or a bladder. In India, over 50% of the parents in 100 different villages told the United Nations that they had killed their children that were female because they didn't want to have a daughter. Worldwide, we're watching violence rising.
How about the economy? What's going to happen according to the Bible with the economy?
Well, that's fascinating, Sid. In Final Warning, I did the research that shows the Bible tells us there'll be devastating inflation, worldwide famine, and we'll see a cashless society in the last days.
Sid, I have a question.
What's that?
I want to know, how soon can all this be happening and the Messiah's return? How soon can it be?
I mean, is it possible that in 5 years the Messiah could return? In 2 years? Or are we talking a million years from now?
No, I believe in the lifetime of the people in this room and our viewers. According to the prophets, those who are living in 1948, in their lifetime, all these things will happen.
You know, in your lifetime, if all these things are going to happen, and some of you are experiencing a little bit of fear, I guarantee you there is something that is more fearful than anything that Grant just